From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Inside Politics, sponsored by United Health Group.
Hello, everyone. I'm NewsChannel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. The American Civil War ended more than 150 years ago, yet it continues even until this week to be debated, in some cases almost refought across the country. President Donald Trump's remarks this week regarding Andrew Jackson and the Civil War, as well as the controversy spiked in a couple of major southern cities, such as New Orleans and Richmond, as they began taking down some longtime statues to Confederate leaders of the Lost Cause. The Tennessee General Assembly has had its own controversy about the Civil War in recent days. Smyrna Representative Mike Sparks is at the center of it all. He's our guest on Inside Politics. Representative Sparks, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for the invite.
This all began when you tried to pass in committee a resolution honoring Samson Keeble, who's the first African-American lawmaker to serve in the Tennessee General Assembly, as well as honor Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest. Now, what made you pair those two together in the same resolution?
Great question. That's one reason I was glad to come on here. Pat, where I see our culture going is I'm a little concerned where people aren't telling the truth about history. And I'm a big history buff, like many of us, and I'm sure yourself included. And I'm reminded about what Edmund Burke once stated. He said, those that don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. And where I'm seeing things, it really concerns me. I'm seeing folks tear down monuments, talking about digging up dead bodies. That really worries me. Samson Keeble was from my community, the old Jefferson community. And it's an extraordinary story. Old Jefferson was once a city right outside of Smyrna, and when the Corps of Engineers came along, they had to displace everyone. Everyone had to move. The Corps of Engineers took the property over. Well, how I knew about Samson Keeble was happened to be over at the battlefield, Stones River Battlefield, at the new
why
entrance.
In the same resolution?
Well, because
we know about Nathan
great
Bedford
question.
Forrest.
Well, Samson Keeble, both of them, what I said, honoring Tennessee's rich history, which included Samson and included Forrest and Forrest's redemptive story. Forrest, and this is what really amazed me when I started reading about Forrest. I've never really studied Forrest. I was born and raised in Smyrna, and I never had really studied. I just heard about it when I was a county commissioner.
He probably captured the city hall down there a couple times during
Yes,
the Civil
he did,
War.
and that's what amazed me about it. But when I started reading about him over the protest at MTSU and that controversy, I just started reading up on him, and I run across a story where he advocated for African Americans, and he had 3,000 African Americans attend his funeral. I stepped back and I thought, well, what's happening here? I said, how come this isn't mentioned? And then I started thinking, how come Samson Keeble's not mentioned? And then when I spoke at MTSU to all the students, not one student knew who Samson Keeble was. None of them knew.
Now, this first resolution you brought up was defeated in committee. You brought a second resolution through the House.
No, the first one made it through House subcommittee.
But it did not make it to the House floor. A second resolution did make it to the House floor. In fact, it was pairing Forrest this time with Pastor Shane Kessler of Lake Charles, Louisiana. Do you have a relationship with this particular pastor? No, why pair those two together?
Well, I think when I read his story of redemption, when I read Forrest's story of redemption, where he started advocating for African Americans, I thought it was extraordinary. Now, a lot of folks don't like to discuss a lot of these issues because it gets very controversial, as you see. And this story shouldn't be controversial because it's the truth of history. It shouldn't be controversial, but I'm reminded of what was it George Orwell, 1984, and it seems like we've kind of come to this course today. And I think journalists like yourself, Pat, should be concerned, because all I did with this resolution, and here's the resolution, this resolution simply honors a pastor, and here it is right here. If you could read, just read what that says.
Materials and recognitions for Shane E. Kessler. This is me giving when he was on that committee. Okay.
Yes.
But it doesn't mention Nathan Bedford Forrest.
Don't mention Forrest. Yes,
but
sir.
It's in there, and that's what angered so many members of the Black Caucus. They didn't realize that was part of the resolution. And you've been a lawmaker for a long time. You voted for many, many resolutions up there.
Yes.
And yes, you're supposed to read all the legislation on your own, but people do not read the stuff that's on the consent committee. So you could understand why some people might feel like a fast one got pulled on them?
No, it's not a fast one though. I mean, I have 25.
What they might feel like it was.
Yes, sir. But I've got 25 co-sponsors on this bill. So I walked around.
Are any of them members of the Black Caucus?
No, I didn't have any members of the Black Caucus sign it. I just had folks sign it that I thought would be interested. But here's a consent counter just to show you. I mean, if we went through here and debated all 27 today.
That's why it's put on the consent calendar.
Yes, sir.
But did you let any members of the Black Caucus who were upset about your first resolution know that a lot of the same language about forest was in the second one?
Yeah, I had G.A. Hardaway on the radio with me back home, talking about Samson Keeble and talking about forest. Folks who go to WGNSradio.com and listen to the interaction. So when folks act like I hoodwinked somebody, I mean, it's very disappointing, especially the things I've been talking about the past. I mean, I've talked about this on the floor openly, and I'm concerned where I see statues and monuments being destroyed. I'm afraid it's going to come up here to Tennessee. And we just talked off air about Sam Davis home. There's a Sam Davis monument. Is that going to be next? I dare say in 2 to 5 years, the path that we're on, it's going to happen. And that's my community. Both these figures, especially Samson Keeble, he was from my area. It's not taught in Black History Month. It's not taught in Tennessee history, because I've taken Tennessee history. I didn't know about it in school. And I was born in Smyrna. This guy was born just 2 miles from where I was born. There is some strange irony with Keeble.
But in terms of Samson Keeble, you didn't bring. Are you bringing a separate resolution back for him?
Well, I am next year. Yes, I did. I met with the Black Caucus. On these 2 resolutions, and I separated Samson from Forrest out of respect for them, and I run it on Samson. And this is the irony. This is what I want your viewers to know. They turned down Samson Keeble. Why would they turn down Samson Keeble?
Well, they're in the same bill.
No, it's separate. No, it's separate. Totally separate. It was a new bill, which is an amendment that rewrote that whole bill. It's just honoring Samson Keeble. Why would somebody be afraid of Samson Keeble?
Let's take a break. We're talking to Representative Mike Sparks of the Smyrna area about a controversy going on up on Capitol Hill about the Civil War. I'd like to continue our conversation after this break.
This is a Storm 5 HD weather update. Sign up for Weather Call at NewsChannel5.com.
It's been a cold, wet, windy day across Middle Tennessee and Kentucky, and unfortunately this rain is not scooting out of here very quickly, so expect persistent, stubborn showers as we head into the evening hours tonight and much cooler temperatures. You add the rain and the wind to the actual temperatures and it has felt quite fall-like. Makes you want a big bowl of soup. Here's a look at temperatures across the southeast right now and current conditions right here in Nashville. Overnight tonight, you guessed it, it's going to be another cold one, but not the coldest of the next 7. 44 degrees overnight tonight. That's where we will bottom out. Tomorrow, there will be some sunshine, but there's also an opportunity to see a brief passing shower or thunderstorm, especially for folks east of Interstate 65 during the afternoon hours tomorrow. Not going to last all day, but you may need to navigate a shower, a brief shower or thunderstorm. Top temperatures 70 on Saturday, 69 sunshine.
If you want to shed the fat and sculpt your body to get that slim, sexy look of your dreams, then you need to stop working out.
Say what?
And start rocking out with Rockin Body, the fun new body makeover system that was created by fitness expert and insanity creator Shaun T.
Rockin Body combines dance and fitness in a fun new way so you can achieve insane weight loss.
I lost 30 pounds dancing.
Now you can tone and tighten your abs, shrink and shape your hips and thighs, and lift and firm your booty, all while you're just dancing.
I've lost 33 pounds. I feel sexy.
And now, for a limited time, the complete $80 Rockin Body system is 75% off. That's right, Rockin Body is only $19.95. We'll even upgrade you to express shipping free. Get the complete Rockin Body system for only $19.95.
Call 1-800-307-0417 or order online at rockinbody.com. 1-800-307-0417. Call now.
Colin Farrell from The Beguiled.
It's a bit of a thriller, bit of a drama, bit of an hour and 40 minutes.
Next, New Ellen.
Colin has agreed to reveal something that he's never told anyone.
So I was doing a sex scene.
Plus, Fifth Harmony's Normani Corday. And these Twisted Sisters.
I'm literally flying away. We can see who the dramatic sister is.
Monday at 3 on News Channel 5.
Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today, State Representative Mike Sparks from the Smyrna area. Representative Sparks, have you mended or repaired your relationships with members of the Black Caucus? You told me off camera that you had been one who had stood up with them last year when there was an issue down in the Murfreesboro area regarding some children being arrested.
Yes, I just
you
left.
You have not damaged that relationship.
Well, a couple of them were probably a little mad, and one came over to me the other day. He said, "I think it was just a mistake." And I said, "You're mad at me?" He says, "No, I'm not mad." I said, "Yeah, you are. You're mad." You know, but this discussion about history, I think, should be out there, and it shouldn't be. History shouldn't be controversial. Truth shouldn't be controversial. But back what you mentioned, last year I did stand with the Black Caucus. I think I'm the first Republican that they know of that stood with the Black Caucus. And the irony with that was, one, I knew there was a reason for me standing with the Black Caucus, bigger than at that time. I knew it had to be something for something like this today. I stood with them because of the young boys that were arrested at the Hobgood Elementary School. I happened to be running a bill on juvenile justice. You know, if a 5-year-old or a 17-year-old is arrested, they don't have to contact their parents or have an attorney present. And I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed. I didn't have the support on that bill. I probably had the support from the Black Caucus on that bill overwhelmingly. But when they asked me to stand with them, you know, I stood with them, and it was kind of odd. No one criticized me for standing with them. Earlier, I just seen Jim Henry, the chief of staff for the governor, and you know, went to his wife's funeral. And oddly enough, I drove Senator Thelma Harper there. You know, it was kind of strange, and we stopped and ate at Cracker Barrel, and she's supposed to come eat at my mother-in-law's house. And you know, folks know Senator Harper, I call her a country girl, and my mother-in-law is a pretty good cook, so she's supposed to come over, and I said, "You want some real good cooking, you eat at my mother-in-law's." So she's supposed to come up to my mother-in-law's. But it is kind of strange, but this is what saddens me with the media today, Pat, is that, you know, they've really, in my opinion, created fake news.
Well, what have you heard from your constituents? You have a fairly significant African-American and Hispanic population.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I have almost 10,000.
What's the reaction been?
Well, I just left a prayer vigil just now, and they asked me to speak, and it was an African American pastor, Pastor Brenda Bryant, that put it together. And sadly, her church burned down 2 years ago, and Channel 5 covered it. And I helped her with a GoFundMe project, and also helped another African American church, Word of Life, that was literally locked out by the city over an easement dispute for 2 years. And Pat, the strange thing with this, and this is what I want your viewers to know, I had to beg a journalist to cover a black church that was locked out for 2 years. I wrote to NAACP. I never heard from him. I told Heidi Weinberg with ACLU, I said, "How come you didn't come to their defense?" They were locked out for 2 years. A white church, Giles Creek Baptist, Pat, built this church in Laverne. Sadly enough, they're out $56,000 in mortgage payments. I called the pastor from the House floor about 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago. I said, Pastor Wellington Johnson. I said, Pastor, where are you at? What's the latest on your church? He says, I think I'm gonna let it go. I said, you can't let your church go. That's where we're at today. Our Constitution, the First Amendment right, I should be able to honor a pastor without controversy. That black church shouldn't be locked out. It was locked out. So all this gets down to the First Amendment, going back what I said, what George Orwell talked about.
Seems to me almost every year, these last few years, the General Assembly has gotten into some controversy surrounding the Civil War. There's been the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust, there have been other things. Why is that?
Well, this is the first controversy I've ever been involved in, you know.
And you hope the last?
Yes, sir. Well, it won't be the last. But, you know, the sad thing about it, I'm really closer with some of the members of the Black Caucus, oddly enough, and Representative Joe Towns, who I think the world of Joe. He sits in front of me. I think the world of Larry Miller, G.A. Hardaway, Antonio Parkinson. And they know I'm passionate about history. But about a month ago, we honored the Memphis Belle. You know, we made that the official aircraft for the state of Tennessee. Well, my dad flew 24 bombing raids in a B-17 over Germany, was shot down once, crash landed twice. And the B-17s that was a training base. Smyrna Airport was a training base where I was born. So that's why I care about this. Well, I stood up on the House floor and said, Nathan Bedford Forrest's great-grandson was shot down over Germany in a B-17, piloting a B-17. Folks don't know this. Well, Joe was a little upset about it, and I said, Joe, this is just history. You can't get upset with history. This is the truth. And if we're going to we can't put a false narrative out there, because these young people today, if they keep hearing these false narratives, no wonder we have division in the streets. Maybe if people knew the truth, maybe people wouldn't be so divisive today.
But you knew that Nathan Bedford Forrest's name alone would be a flashpoint for any legislation that talked about him. Usually an ounce of sugar is the better way to go at it. Do you wish you had gone back and talked to some people and explained what you were trying beforehand?
So I met with the Black Caucus. And? So I separated the resolution. I totally separated. So this whole controversy is not about Nathan Bedford Forrest. Really, the controversy boils down to me recognizing an author who wrote a book, and he's a Christian. He happened to write a book.
It was the subject of his book, not the author himself.
But that shouldn't be, under our First Amendment, Pat, that should not be a problem. I have another book that I'm recognizing a gentleman. He doesn't know I'm doing it. I have the book here. He doesn't know about this resolution till probably next week. It's a surprise. He happened to write a column about Forrest last month. So do we ban his book now? If we're going to ban this guy's book, do we ban this next journalist's book? Or are we going to ban Pat Nolan down the road because you covered somebody who's controversial? That's where these things are going.
One of those you mentioned earlier was Sam Davis. For people who don't know, he was known as the boyhood hero of the Confederacy.
Yes, sir.
He was hung by the North as a spy after he was captured and refused to release any information.
Yes, sir.
What has made him such an enduring Civil War figure, at least in Tennessee?
Well, you know, that story, it's close to my heart. You mentioned you had some field trips there. Well, I was the only kid in my 4th grade class that didn't get to go to the field trip. I didn't have the $5. And that always stuck with me. And the strange thing that was strange, a TA member reached out to me, a teacher at my old school, took me to my same classroom. She didn't know about this, that I didn't get to go to this field trip. After I was at that classroom about 4 years ago, I was speaking at War Memorial, introducing Douglas Henry, the late Douglas Henry, on behalf of the 150th anniversary of Sam Davis. So I was thrilled about that, but what always stuck with me is probably being that young 4th grader that didn't get to go to this field trip. And to some people, it may be like, well, Mike, you need to get over that, but those things stick with you in life. Your background shapes the things that you are passionate about. I'm passionate about history, passionate about many other issues, and the Sam Davis home is just basically a focal point for the town of Smyrna, and it's something that needs to be remembered. We were able to help them with a grant from the state, Senator Kitchen and I, for $10,000 to try to help with the home. They're keeping it in good shape, but it's something we do need to remember.
Representative Mike Sparks is our guest on Inside Politics. We've been talking about the state legislature and the Civil War. They're two different things. They're 150 years apart, but there's still controversy over both. Talk to you. We'll be back in just a few minutes to continue our conversation.
Whether a house is new or whether a house is 20 years old, we can go in and we can find debris in the lines. Mr. B's is about doing duct cleaning the best that we can do it and better than anybody else in the industry. That's what I personally stand behind and guarantee. We never make a claim that we're going to help your health. That's just something we don't do. But again, I personally believe that if I put you in a cleaner environment, it's got to have a positive impact on you. And we literally cut a hole into the main trunk line. That's the main artery, just like a tree trunk. And we attach a HEPA vacuum system to it.
All right.
When we do that and turn it on, it causes a negative airflow. As that machine's sucking everything backwards, we go to each line and we'll brush it, and then we air sweep it down to the trunk line. So we've taken everything back to that negative airflow. So again, whether it's upstairs or downstairs, you saw that everything is being brushed and air swept to the trunk line, not bringing it back into your breathing atmosphere. What makes my home need an air duct cleaning? You have to make that decision. It's your environment. And so if you have black lines at the edge of your carpets, or you have any sort of dust, excess dust in your home that you're dealing with, and that's a problem for you, then you definitely would want your air ducts cleaned. But most people understand too that if they'll just look down the return, take the filter out a little bit and look down the return, they'll see all the dust that they're breathing on an everyday basis. The way we do the cleaning, most residential homes will be good for 5 to 7 years. We do recommend that you have your system serviced by a licensed contractor and also use a good filter. We've been doing this for over 17 years now. We take pride in the fact that we have an A+ rating at the Better Business Bureau. Also the fact that we don't believe that anybody's going to out-clean us. And as I've said before, people can outprice me, but they're not going to out-clean me. There's only one way, and that's the right way, and that's what we do at Mr. B's Air Duct Cleaning.
Every time I hear the alarm bell go off in school, I think it's an air raid.
A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed. I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close.
I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us.
But I know it's all gonna be worth it. I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words.
These are not my words.
These are not my words.
We are back on Inside Politics. Our guest today, Representative Mike Sparks from the Smyrna area. Representative Sparks, President Donald Trump this week made some remarks about Andrew Jackson and the Civil War. You and both of us grew up in Tennessee. We've always been interested in Andrew Jackson. But did you ever think that Andrew Jackson had anything to do with the Civil War? He was dead 16 years before it was fought. Yes, sir. I never did either. But as a youngster, we always admired Andrew Jackson. I was with Donald Trump at the Hermitage, me and probably 60 other legislators, and many Democrats were there, and it was a very cold day, but I could tell that he connected with Andrew Jackson. Do you think that perhaps President Trump was somehow confusing with the nullification crisis that Jackson won over John C. Calhoun, which was over trade in the 1830s, and somehow he got that confused with being involved, because that was about nullifying a federal act? Yes, he may have, but I can tell you, Pat, watching him speak in front of the Hermitage, in front of that front door, and he talked about Jackson, his Irish heritage, and I guess the big banks back then, you could tell that he connected with Jackson, no doubt. I noticed an interview about a month ago at the White House, and behind him was the same statue that we see up here at the state capitol of Andrew Jackson on top of the horse. But it's also in New Orleans. Yes, sir. And you know, you're seeing pushback against Andrew Jackson too, but that is history. And the strange thing, Pat, is you see even a group like ISIS that's tearing down monuments. You've seen this in Germany back during back in the World War II era, and I just feel like people should remember the past. We've talked about what's going on in other cities. We've talked about New Orleans, Richmond, and even Memphis have been taking down some of these post-war monuments that were built to major figures in the Confederacy. There are several Civil War related paintings and busts up on the Hill. Should those continue to stay there? It would take a very long and controversial process to remove them, but should Tennessee have a debate about that? Well, I know we've had much of that debate. Steve McDaniels, Representative Steve McDaniels, has led much of that discussion. Senator Bill Ketchrin with the, I think it was the Historical Act Preservation. I believe it was passed in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And I try to put myself in others' shoes, but if we're feeding people a false narrative, and that's where I think we've been fed a false narrative. This story that I've tried to bring apart is a story of redemption. And that author that I wanted to recognize talked about Nathan Bedford Forrest's redemption. And all of us, whether you're a lawmaker, have made mistakes in life, and as a Christian, there's a redemptive story in all of us who are Christians. And I think there was a redemptive story with Nathan Bedford Forrest, and that's all my resolution did here. You could look at this, it's about Shane Castler. It happens to mention he wrote a book, and for this to be controversial and what I'll call fake news, which really I welcome it, Pat, because people wouldn't know about this story of redemption. They wouldn't know about his book without this controversy. So the controversy really has been a blessing. Have you spoken to him about it? What does he think about it? Have you spoken to him directly? The author was like, hey, I'm sorry I got you in all this kind of trouble. I said, no problem. I mean, but as a Christian, you know, God will use the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and the weak to shame the strong. So this controversy has really been a blessing, because I wouldn't be here with you discussing this issue about Samson Keeble, the first black lawmaker, if it wasn't for this controversy. Now, the statue of Sam Davis we mentioned earlier, it is quite prominent on the hill. It's right there at the corner of 7th and Charlotte. I mean, it's very visible from right there. You're concerned that there's going to be an effort perhaps to I am concerned. Move it down? And it was before. Are you surprised there hasn't been an effort already? No, well, I feel like it's going that way. I do. I was at a veterans service about